As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
He's so fluffy, I'm gonna die!
Taking them so long.
Hey, these guys are professionals. They're the best.
Totally. I hate a guy with a car and no sense of humor.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
Oh, yeah, the Great Bambino. Of course. I thought you said the Great Bambi.
We love our Thursdays when we get John Hinderaker and president of the Center for the American Experiment. Love chatting the news, talk about what's going on in the world. But it's different today. The last week has been so much fun. Love having you on, John. You're in the news. You're not making it, but your organization is actually the top news stories of the week, if you're asking me. Thanks for being on the show, John. And we'll talk about what I'm talking about.
Great to be with you as always, Al.
So you're out there, you're a think tank, you're putting out, conservative thoughts. I love, not a problem here. But when they mess with you guys, you usually win. Here's the story. Minnesota Department of Education is going to pay you $7,000 for this data request stall they put on you. And people are going to say, $7,000, what difference does it make? Oh, that's nothing. It's the fact that this MDE, the Minnesota Department of Education, was not giving you the information you deserved, and you said, enough of that. We're going to get it, and you took them to court. Good, and a win.
Well, here's the story, Al. So this has to do with the ethnic studies mandate, which our legislature imposed. And they define in the law ethnic studies. It's, quote, liberated ethnic studies. It's very radical, very anti-American, very race-oriented, very left-wing. And so Katrin Wigfall, our education policy fellow, attended the open portions of the meetings of the committee that was developing the framework, which would tell public schools all across the state of Minnesota, every K through 12 class would be impacted by this new law. So this framework is to tell them how to do it. And the co-chairman of this committee is a guy appointed by Tim Walz, who is on video saying that the government of the United States needs to be overthrown because we are a hopelessly evil country. Okay, this is who Tim Walz has put in charge of completely revamping K through 12 education in Minnesota. So Katrin knew, because she attended these meetings, that the framework had been written. It was done. It was scheduled to be released in September with a public comment period in October. Well, August came and went, and September came and went, and they didn't release the framework. Why is that? Well, it's because in August, Tim Walz got selected as the Democrats' vice presidential nominee. And this document was so radical that they knew it would be an issue in the presidential campaign, and so they just sat on it. So Katrin wrote to them and requested the document. Clearly was supposed to be available to the public, and they didn't respond to her request. And then we served a formal Data Practices Act request, and the Department of Education simply ignored it. Well, then we sued them. We hired the Upper Midwest Law Center, and we sued them to get possession of this public document, which they were sitting on. But they achieved their goal, because by the time we sued them and they responded, the election was over. So they successfully covered it up until after the election in which Tim Walz is running for vice president. Well, then they produce it to us. Somebody in the AG's office who's now defending the case obviously told them, well, you have to give it to him. You don't have any defense here. So they send us the document along with a memo that was obviously created just for us, in which the Minnesota Department of Education says, we're not actually going to adopt this framework. Okay. Well, the reason they're not going to adopt it is because it is scandalously radical. I mean, for example, kindergartners, this is amazing to me. Kindergartners are supposed to go around and form relationships with indigenous activist groups to learn about how indigenous people are oppressed in Minnesota. Well, that's a heck of an assignment for a kindergarten. It just goes on and on and on. And so because they violated the law by not giving us the document, we had to hire lawyers to pry it loose from them. We made a settlement demand, and we've settled the case. We've now got the check. We got $3,500 for us for our trouble, and $3,500 for attorney's fees to the Upper Midwest Law Center, total of $7,000 from the Minnesota Department of Education.
But I don't know, this sounds so wrong. The idea that they got slapped down, they knew they had to do it. They're now settled and said, yeah, we knew we had to do it. This is not going to change anything. $7,000 to the Minnesota Department of Education is like you said, they won. They got what they wanted. They hold it off. Here's $7K so we don't get, you know what I'm saying? I want this to be someone to watch from other departments say, well, we're not going to do that. That's just not enough. Can you not? I don't know. It's not a civil.
Well, Al, the Department of Education mislaid $250 million.
What?
Feeding our future. So I suppose losing $7,000 doesn't really sting, when it comes to that budget.
That's true. But congratulations on the win, because that is open to all of us, and we should have been able to see it. And the idea that they were couching it and saying, no, we're not going to let you know about it until it works for us is amazing. I want to go to break a little early if we can. This broke, but in yesterday, I presume, I saw it yesterday. The Feeding Our Futures, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota, was caught on tape, and the American Experiment has that tape. I want to talk about it, find out what it is. This could be huge, right? I mean, just to lead in, this is
certainly should be. It certainly should be huge, yeah.
All right, we'll talk about it coming up next on the Al Travis Show.
All the special interests are represented in St. Paul. But who speaks for you? Center of the American Experiment does. Our policy fellows dig into the tough issues that matter to you and offer common sense solutions on education, taxes, crime, and energy. American Experiment is the trusted, nonpartisan voice of Minnesotans like you. We are working every day to make Minnesota a better, safer, more prosperous place. We are American Experiment. Go to americanexperiment.org to learn more.
Do you have a closet full of old videos, photos, slides, or films? Regain that space and preserve those memories for future generations. Visit archivinglifemedia.com or call 952-829-8018. See how safe and simple it is to digitize all your media. Gain peace of mind knowing that all those important memories will be saved and can be seen and shared again. Do it today. Check out archivinglifemedia.com or give them a call, 952-829-8018.
The Al Travis Show, the last place you can go and hear all sides. Respectful, thoughtful, and grateful.
Now this gets me an interesting one because timing is everything. There's going to be a lot of nuance here. But John Hinderaker, president of the American Experiment, is on with us. Yesterday, I think it broke that the American Experiment has a tape of Keith Ellison, the AG here in Minnesota, literally talking to these people that are now defendants in Feeding Our Future, saying, "Don't you worry, I got your back." Is that am I busting that down? Maybe you should give me a better It's
Yeah,
55
so
minutes
so
long.
let's place it in context here, Al. So this is a 54-minute tape made by one of the participants, which was on the exhibit list in the trial of Amy Bach and last name Saeed, can't say his first name, where they were just convicted in the federal court here. It
Yeah.
was not entered into evidence, but we obtained it from an officer of the court. It was identified as a trial exhibit. So one of the participants taped this meeting. It appears to be in Keith Ellison's office or a conference room in his office, the Attorney General's office.
Sure.
And the people attending the meeting, there's 5 or 6 of them. One of them is Saeed, who was just recently found guilty of 21 fraud counts in the federal court. Another one is another Feeding Our Future defendant who's awaiting trial on criminal charges. And then there are others associated with the Feeding Our Future scandal. And the meeting takes place in November of 2021, just 5 weeks before the big FBI raids that blew the scandal wide open. So it's quite late in the day. So these people have come to Attorney General Keith Ellison to ask for his help in fending off the Minnesota Department of Education, which is making, frankly, some very feeble efforts, to
stop it.
investigate and preferably not allow hundreds of millions of dollars to be stolen, And so they come to Keith Ellison and they complain to him that the Minnesota Department of Education is racist. And the Department of Education is discriminating against these Somali-owned small businesses. And Keith Ellison is really sympathetic to that. He goes along with the idea that Minnesota state agencies are racist, and he talks about how he has had to intervene with them on occasion in the past. And he says sometimes a call from the Attorney General is all it takes. And this is what he says about the Feeding Our Future investigations that were going on at that time. And again, this is only 5 weeks before the big FBI
raid.
I'm going to quote here from the tape. He says, "Walls agrees with me that this piddly, stupid stuff running small people out of business is terrible." Okay, that's what he thinks about investigating the Feeding Our Future scandal, and Keith Ellison undertakes to help these participants in the fraud, and he repeatedly says, "This is the first time I've heard about this. This has not come to my attention until now." And I'm just scrolling here, looking for the quotes, but he undertakes to look into it and to help these people who turn out to be, some of them, not all of them, some of them turn out to be criminal defendants in the Feeding Our Future case. And one of the things they talk about is campaign contributions. And early on, like a minute into the tape, one of the participants describes this guy, Saeed, who's the co-owner of the Safari restaurant, as, quote, a huge contributor to Mayor Fry. And Keith Ellison says, "Well, I hope he remembers." That is Jacob Fry. I hope he remembers. And they talk about the idea. At one point, one of these guys says, "The first generation Somali immigrants didn't understand how the system works, but we do. We second generation Somalis understand you need to band together, you need to be prepared to go to court, and you need to have politicians on your side." And they talk about raising money for Keith Ellison. Now, this is illegal. You're not supposed to talk about fundraising in a government office. And while we don't know this for absolutely certain, it seems clear that they are, in fact, in a government office. Anybody can, we've made the tape public, by the way. Anybody can listen to it, draw your own conclusions. But it seems clear that they're in a government office, and they talk about fundraising. And 9 days after this meeting, Keith Ellison and his son, who was on the Minneapolis City Council, held a fundraiser that was attended by several of these people, and 2 of them maxed out to Keith Ellison. He raised $10,000 from people associated with Feeding Our Future at that fundraiser, and his son got contributions from even more of them.
Are you saying that was 2 weeks later, sir? Just 2 weeks after?
Days. 9 days after the meeting. 9 days after the meeting, where they apparently illegally, I say that because it appears that they're in a government office, at one point, Keith Ellison gets up, he writes on a whiteboard, he's sending and receiving emails during the meeting. It certainly sounds like he is hosting this meeting, and these people have come to see him, to request.
Well, let me ask you this, because the timing is everything here. If this is well before anyone knew anything about Feeding Our Futures was going south, he would just consider them donors. I get it, whether you can do it at the office or not my point. But if we're now 9 days after that meeting, we're within 4 weeks of the FBI raid, they knew about it. I'm under the impression the FBI contacted the Minnesota Department of Education well into that and said, hey, we think there's fraud going on. Wouldn't that have gotten to Ellison's desk at some? I mean, if the FBI is calling MDE and saying, we think there's fraud going on, you don't get the attorney general involved to see if it is? You know what I'm saying? Did he have any context?
See, we don't know that, Al. We don't know what was going on behind the scenes. What we do know is that the reason why these people are there complaining is that the Minnesota Department of Education had finally, after hundreds of millions of dollars had gone out the door, they were finally trying to cut them off. And so these people had gone to court to try to prevent the Department of Education from stopping making these fraudulent payments, and they had basically bullied the Department of Education into continuing to make the payments, and they talk about that here. So the investigation was well underway, and there was actually a battle going on here, and what these people wanted Keith Ellison to do was to intervene in that fight and call off the Minnesota Department of Education and get them to stop trying to cut off these fraudulent payments. And Keith Ellison promises he's going to try to help them in this.
But that's the conflict. I'm not a lawyer, but this seems like the conflict. So even if the federal government had not decided they would take over these trials, Keith Ellison, the AG of Minnesota, probably could not done it himself. He couldn't try somebody who gave him $10,000.
Let me add the last element to this story, which is in the post that Bill Glenn of our office did yesterday at AmericanExperiment.org. This is where the story got broken. In September of 2022, which would be then 10 months after this meeting that we got the tape recording of. Okay, 10 months later, September of 2022. At that point, the thing is broken wide open. Criminal prosecutions are being brought. Keith Ellison issued a public statement in which he said, quote, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and his office have been deeply involved for 2 years in holding Feeding Our Future accountable. Close quote.
Oh, wow.
Okay? That is a complete lie. Okay, a complete lie. 9 months before that, not only was he not holding Feeding Our Future accountable, but he said, gee, I never heard about this before. And his conclusion was, well, I'm going to try to help you guys, right? Far from 2 years spent being deeply involved in holding Feeding Our Future accountable.
This is, again, I don't understand.
By the way, I was looking for these quotes, and I want to say them to make this story complete.
Go ahead.
At the 44-minute mark, Ellison tells these people who have come to see him, of course, I'm here to help. And at the 45-minute mark, he says, let's go fight these people. These people being Minnesota Department of Education, who at that time were trying to stop the fraudulent payments.
All right, but this is, again, I don't know how the Attorney General thing works, but if someone comes to your office as Attorney General saying, I have an issue you need to help me with, and then also hands you cash for your reelection, aren't you out of helping at all? You mean you can't then say I'm helping, you know what I'm saying? Even, I'm not saying bought off. I don't know how it works in the Attorney General business, but if somebody comes in and complains about something, you know what? I'll look into it. Hang on to your check because I got to find out what side I am on this. How can you say I'll help you out? You don't know the issue and take money and then say, but I'll be completely honest when we get, you know what I'm saying? It seems like that's a weird box.
And take campaign contributions 9 days later. By the way, the election was over. You know, we're talking about the meeting is in November of 2021.
Yeah.
And then and it's 9 days after the meeting that he gets the campaign contributions and his son gets the campaign contributions, the election's over at that point. So I don't know, maybe they're paying off debt or saving up for the next election, but it is the timing is a little bit curious.
So what goes on from here, John, in the last minute? What happens with this? The people are going to read about this? Is this somebody's going to say, wait a minute, we got to check? Who checks out the Attorney General?
Well, yeah, good question. Normally, you might think the Attorney General should, but of course that won't happen. So a number of other outlets have this tape. I'm reliably informed that the Star Tribune has the tape. Apparently chose not to run a story about it. As far as I know, the only place you can hear the tape, the only place you can read about it is AmericanExperiment.org.
So this just dies. This just goes away.
Well, it's not going away. We sent an email to 190,000 people yesterday. Special alert, with a link to the story. It's, that's how you know about it, Al, I suspect.
Yep.
It's not going to go away. We'll just see where the story develops from here.
I'm completely out of time. I love having you on the show, John. I appreciate you being here. AmericanExperiment.org. Go there. Obviously, you guys are busting news left and right. Thanks for being here, bud.
Great to be with you, Al.